So we've got Fotis Fitsilis talking about digital tools to bridge the representation gap.
Thank you, Stephen. It's a great honor addressing you at the PSA Parl annual conference and the fifth panel. It's a very interesting topic I'm going to discuss today. And I'm going to ask you also to contribute as much as possible during discussion, but also with your emails and so that we can get it developed in the follow-up time. I'm going to talk about digital tools to bridge the representation gap. We're going to define the topic and frame it in the beginning, and then I'm going to try to bring the Parliament into the greater picture, and finally end up with some early conclusions. Now, what is this all about? When I talk about representation gap, I refer to it as a technology-induced disruption of the link of trust between parliaments and citizens. So it has a lot to do with trust against the major representative institution. So this is not to be understood in the sense of democratic representation. So we don't want to mess up with the way MPs are elected. We're primarily talking about the link between citizens and the institution, the Parliament. So, in this sense, this notion is rather similar to the notion of the generation gap, only it could be bigger this time. Let's see what the situation in which we are currently. We have long ago started talking about citizen engagement. Well, this is not something strange, and this should be familiar to most of you. Very significant scholars like Lord Norton or Cristina Leston-Bandera have debated and written about this since at least the beginning of the century, 20 years ago. So, is there anything new happening in the field? I think it does, and the new things going on have to do primarily with the significant developments around social media, which are now omnipresent and omnidirectional. This wasn't the case 20 years ago. An additional parameter or dimension that needs to be taken in this equation is the role of algorithms. So since people talk also politics and do politics, conduct politics and political discourse on digital platforms, algorithms have been developed in several technologies that are able to mine through this huge mountains of data in order to make sense what is currently the state of play on the platforms. And together with the rise of algorithms, one has to take into account that the regulatory environment is rather weak at the moment. The European Union, for instance, has tried to bring some regulations into the game, like the General Data Protection Regulation of the sorts, but still regulatory environment is rather weak. And then there are several incidents. I quote here the Cambridge Analytica incident that most of you should know, that made aware that if you don't regulate the use of algorithms and the conduct on the digital platforms appropriately, then strange things might happen. And in addition, a third dimension that came recently into play is the legal informatics regime, which is not a single technology, but I would say a collection of technologies and standards that are able to provide state-of-the-art and as well future-oriented services to users and citizens. And this is what I'm going to talk about. So we have talked about what's going on and what is the topic of interest. Let's see how we can put it into how we can frame it within the parliamentary environment. Now, there are two main stakeholders here I would like to discuss. The first is the MPs themselves, and the second one is the institution as such, the parliament, or the parliaments, plural. If we compare how these two major stakeholders think vis-a-vis the representation vis-a-vis the citizens and how they act, we can see some significant differences. MPs were among the first in the political sphere to see the dynamics of the new medium, the digital medium, and the dynamics of social media. So they have adjusted, many, not all, rapidly. So they maintain strong links by using these new communication channels to the electorate. And obviously there are differences among different MPs, but also a lot of success stories can be determined. The institution, the parliament, on the other side, could be considered as late adopters. There's an issue here, whom to inform by these new digital media. You need to have a media strategy. Media strategy and the media mix target specific target groups. So since parliaments are difficult to target as institutions, whole society or the entirety of the citizens in any given society, it's difficult also to differentiate between the target groups of citizens. There are obviously institutions that perform better than others, but and in any case, there are also success stories. And from my point of view, the Westminster Parliament is one of them with its communication, with its digital communication approach. And how are we to change this? And one way to change this, so bridge the representation gap between citizens and parliament, is by harvesting the power legal informatics gives us. But this is easier said than done. How are we to do this? We're going to do that, and we are, in my team at least, and other teams around the world, are trying to build, so to say, inclusive digital platforms. The idea is, if social media platforms are so successful into bringing lots of people together, debating of any kind of things, why shouldn't parliaments or any kind of institutions, technically, why shouldn't they build their own platforms so that they can advance parliamentary discourse or political discourse through them? Important here is to select a proof of concept. So which function of the parliament are we going to tackle first? The use of standards and open software is particularly important. You can even invite the public, the general public, program for you the relevant applications and solutions. It's important to do that in a mobile-first approach, because everybody or most of people at the moment are using their mobiles accessing the digital world. And it's of importance if one uses emerging technologies. Some examples that we are currently experimenting with are virtual worlds, e-deliberation software and platforms, and participatory legislation. So these are not things that is future stuff. This is going on right now. People are experimenting with that, including ourselves. And here I would like to mention a few key parameters for dealing with these kind of experiments. One is to use standardized technologies, because you want your examples to be reused by other parliaments. You want third parties to reuse your software, your application, so that you create a certain buzz and possibly an environment where a lot of such applications are gathered together. You need to create machine-readable content, so that computers can at all times interact with your content. You need to make that semantic web compatible, so that the future of web, that in the future people can see behind and read what is going on these days. And obviously, what is common for all software nowadays, it has to be user-friendly or citizen-friendly. It's basically the same thing. It needs to be inclusive for all people to be accessible and to use equally easy, and of course for it to be safe. You don't want your personal data to be exposed to be a threat for cyber attacks. And to conclude, the future is now cliche. I would say it still holds. Parliaments need to act now, otherwise they risk become insignificant in the eyes of the citizens when talking technology. Then parliaments on the other end, need to make up their minds how they would like to adapt. So they need a strategy, an institutional strategy on how to tackle the digital trends. A lot of ground has been lost by many parliaments in the world, but this is not as such, it's not bad at all, because emerging tech can help bridge the gap very quickly. What is very important is to make the solutions compatible to the semantic web, so that it is future-proof. And above all, the development, the design, and the implementation of such solutions and tools need to be citizen-centric. And ideally, citizens can have, as for instance, within focus groups or such development procedures, need to be involved in their development. And by saying that, thank you for your attention, and I'm at your disposal for questions and discussion.